نفران الفيوت نمشي نبقى my swab وتيمين. Um, Hi everyone. Just want to talk briefly, well, I don't know about briefly, about pronunciations. It's a topic that a lot of people ask about, is what pronunciation should I use or should I learn? There are different things. So I'll try to go over them, try to present them. I could be a little bit biased because I have a favorite, but it should give you a good overview on what's going on when it comes to Coptic pronunciation, because there is some variety and they can be different in many areas. So for starter, and we need to distinguish between dialect and pronunciation. So like you see in the map, this is the map of Egypt. The map has, so Egypt had dialects just like any other language. So if you speak Arabic, if you're in Aswan or all the way to Alexandria, the dialect is a little bit different. There's like the regional dialect, basically. Or you have like the common, like, British, American, Australian. They're different dialects of the same language. So back in the days when people spoke Coptic as a native language, they still had their own differences between them. The most common dialects that are most commonly used is the Bohairic, which you can see north of the country, and the Sahidic, which is like near Upper Egypt, so south of the country, but it was more the common dialect across Egypt. It was like the urban dialect. So if you're an American, if you're in Texas or California, and maybe California, you probably have different dialects a little bit. But there's like the American English. There's the American way that everyone in urban centers would understand and would speak, and that was the Sahidic. It was the dominant dialect throughout Egypt up until Coptic ceased to become the main language in Egypt. Bohairic being in the north, being close to the monasteries, especially the monastery of St. Macarius and Nitra, Wadi Natrun, where a lot of the liturgical text was being transcribed. Bohairic took over. So we even have some evidence of like Sahidic being translated to Bohairic, and then when this became the church Coptic, it's just the one when Coptic ceased to be anywhere else. Bohairic spread everywhere and became basically now the Coptic. So if you want to learn Coptic for the sake of the church, you probably go Bohairic. But if you want to learn more academic, so things that aren't necessarily Christian or liturgics, you want to read like magic texts, you probably go with Sahidic, because there's just way more non-liturgical texts in Sahidic back during the native era. So that's dialects of Egypt, of Coptic. Now, Coptic survived to us mainly written. So you go here, and then we have the alphabet. And then you look at the alphabet, and you're like, okay, I see, let's say, the Sahidic is writing the word Rome, and then the Bohairic writing Romi. So the dialects, the Copts throughout Egypt, more or less maintain the same sound per letter. So regardless of where you are, you would write, this is an R, this is an M, this is an E, so this is an E sound, this is an A sound. If your dialect says Rome, you end it with an A sound, like the A letter. If your dialect says Rumi, you add an E sound. A place like Fayoum, where a lot of the R was as an L, they would write Lomi. So they would actually not write an R and process an L. Let's say we do in English, where we write the same way and then pronounce differently. You say like budget and budget. No, you would write, if you write budget, you put an U sound, an U letter, and if you put a budget, you put an A letter. Similarly, Lomi, you would write like an L, the equivalent of an L, and then end with an E. Inside it could be Rome, so an R and then an A sound. So Copts were precise in how they pronounce their language. Not a lot of variation, like very, very minute, insignificant variation between how they would use a letter, but overall it was very consistent. So we received that text. If you look at the Sahidic, you say my Rome, for lover of mankind, and in Bohairic you see my Romi. Perfect. The question is, when I look at this letter, so I got it written differently for a different dialect, so I can say it's different dialects. Now let's focus on Bohairic. That's where most Egyptians would like to speak Bohairic, because someone needs it at the church. Okay, I see this letter. What do I do with it? What sound does it make? So if you look at this alphabet, just random, I think it's like I remember it was, I can't remember where this picture comes from, but let's say the B sound. What do I do with the B? Is it a B? Is it a V? Is it a W sound? we don't know what to do. And that's where the pronunciation and deviation of pronunciation comes. So it's not dialects. It's when I look at a word, regardless of the dialect, what sound do I make with these letters? So there are three pronunciations that are widely used. The first is called the academic. The second is called the Old Bohairic. And the third is called Greco Bohairic. Each of them come from a different place. They target different people like to use them. I don't know if they're mutually intelligible. They should be kind of, but their pronunciation based on modern people's effort. So it's not it's everyone's trying to estimate what people used to speak back in the days. So the first one we have is the academic pronunciation. This is the one that almost is used mainly by Sahidic, by basically Egyptian scholars who tend to read a lot of Sahidic, because it's not, it's like, I don't know, I don't care what the liturgy is written in right now, was prayed in right now, but I have way more text in Sahidic. So people usually like to stick to Sahidic if they want to study, and it has way more words, way more vocab, way more documents, and it covers anything from, like, I remember seeing a manuscript of like a honeybee guy asking for his money back, to contracts, to Bible and liturgies, and way more Life of Saints, just because it was the main language. This is the academic pronunciation. This was based on we have manuscripts. We can do some linguistic science and come up with what the sounds were most likely sounded like back then when it was written natively, based on linguistic science. So they do things like checking for spelling mistakes across words. So it means like, okay, these are probably the same, they're making the same sound. Therefore, it's like they're probably related somehow. Look at how it evolved from ancient Egyptian, from demotic, from hieroglyphs. And based on linguistic science, they're able to deduce what the sound sounds like. This one is very simple. It's almost one sound per letter. The grammar works great with this, and I'm going to show you how later the grammar sometimes gets messed up if you use a different pronunciation, but the grammar just works nicely because it's based on, let's look at the grammar, how the letters are being interchanged when different sounds come, but we know it's within the same structure, therefore we can tell these sounds are very similar to each other. So it's based on linguistic science. There is a lot of debate on some sounds, but more or less it's consistent. Something like the B, is it a B or a V, or where does it come in between? Things like omega and omicron. Is the omega a change of quality or length? It's more or less standardized. Like, you can go just the beta being a V or a B, and then the O just a long O. More or less fixed and standardized, but there's a lot of debate that you can get into if you want to, but it's more or less consistent. That's the academic pronunciation. The second one we have is what is called Old Bohairic. A lot of people, especially in Arabic, would call it Lahga Saidi, or the Sahidi dialect. It's not. It has nothing to do with Saidi. It actually just sounds like you're speaking Saidi Egyptian. It just sounds too Arabized, and this is actually which actually kind of makes sense. This is the pronunciation that was actually handed down to us through the people living in Egypt. So up until the 18th century, there was like the 19th century, so in the 1800s, a Reformation happened. I remember, I think it was Pope Carlos IV, I think, the father of Reformation, I believe. Coptic was reformed. So before that, Old Bohairic Coptic was the Coptic. Sorry, let me make sure this is recording. It is recording. Amazing. This is the Coptic that was actually being used. So it's not made up. It's the one that's been handed down to us. It's in the Reformation. It kind of got lost, and then Dr. Amir Meher, who's now Abuna Shnuda, I believe in Rochester, New York, made this revival where he wrote, I think, like a 1,000-page thesis on why this should be the main Coptic. And eventually, I believe this Coptic was even taught in the Coptic Institute in Cairo. But this is the one that I dislike the most, simply because it's super Arabized. It did survive to us not through Coptic speakers. It survived to us through Copts who were Arabic speakers. So all the sounds basically just FYI, I'm a bit biased that I dislike this. So what I'm saying could be a little bit biased. Yeah. So for the Arabic sounds, it just lost all the qualities that do not exist in the in Arabic sounds. So anything that you don't see in Arabic do not exist in Old Bohairic anymore. And I believe this is like it just got really bad that eventually a lot of vowels just sound the same. So I have the alpha, the A, and the eta, or the eta, depending on pronunciation, just became all like an A. So you say prophetess or Benyot Khennefawi. It just lost. There is no, if you try to compare, it would be similar to maybe a manuscript that you read in the 14th century, where it's like, Coptic died at this point, and we know that for sure because the history of the patriarchs started being written in Arabic around like the year 1000-ish. The history of the patriarchs written by Coptic bishops just became written in Arabic. That's what we know. It's like, all right, Coptic's dead at this point. It just couldn't survive. Namely, I believe in the early 700s or 800s, if I'm not mistaken, Marwan something. He was one of the Umayyads caliphs, and he just did Arabic. He Arabized everything. Actually, when the Muslims came to Egypt, things remained in Coptic and in Greek. Things were fine until someone guy is like, if you don't speak Arabic, you're out. And eventually it went from the lead all the way down. That like within 300 years, Coptic was just gone at this point. And that's actually why it prompted people to write dictionaries and write grammar, which was never written in Coptic until it was like, hey, it's getting lost. Maybe we should write something for the future generation. So beyond this point, Coptics are just basically spoken by Arabs at this point. Coptic is spoken by Arabic speakers, and you can see that actually now when people are trying to do the Greco or the Reformed way, and you have a letter that is part of a P. When they can't pronounce a P, they go with a B. It's just the Arabic way of doing this. That's just how it is. Just for the nature of their basically how it functions, because that's their mother tongue was Arabic. Some people still like it. They still like to use it. A lot of evidence they like to point to is a lot of current names and city names in Egypt sound exactly the same if you do the Old Bohairic, which still proves the point. It's based on the Arabized way. A good example that it's like Aswan, the Egyptian, the name actually used to be called Swan in Coptic. I believe I saw it on a map, which proves the point that just because Arabic can't have two consonants the same syllable behind each other, so they just had to add Aswan. So, and then you can apply this to any city name where it would match the Old Bohairic, and you find how Arabized became. And then if it match the Old Bohairic, I'm like, cool, yeah, I don't want to use Coptic as been Arabized. If it's up to me, I would put a milestone at 600, where when the Arabs came to Egypt, and be like, okay, I want to speak this Coptic that was written, that was spoken in the year 600. Some people also claim that it's used in a city, in a village in Said called Zaytiya, I believe, where they speak Coptic. Funny enough, they actually speak Bohairic. I'm not sure if they're fluent, but they do speak Bohairic. And if they speak Bohairic, that means they were taught Coptic, not surviving Coptic, because the Coptic that would have been in Upper Egypt with the Sahidi Coptic, which is not what they speak. So they probably just learned Coptic that was handed down through learning, which doesn't prove anything. So Coptic got into really bad shape that in the 1800s it had to be reformed, which brings us to Greco Bohairic. Greco Bohairic, from the word Greco, is Greek. They tried to reform it and standardize it because it was very influenced by Arabic. Again, the Arabic in Egypt was very different. Also has to do with actually the Arabs that migrated to Egypt at different parts in Egypt came from different places. So a lot of the tribes from Yemen came to southern Egypt. A lot of other tribes would have come to northern Egypt. So Egypt, even the Arabic in Egypt is very different. If you're in Cairo and in deep side, like Upper Egypt, the Arabic is you can understand each other, but it's very different. So that also affected the Coptic that was Arabized. The old way, like let's say Cairo would actually pronounce the gah sound, which is a jah sound. It's like, and that actually affected Coptic. So the Pope, I believe Pope Cyril, was like, let's just fix it, standardize it. Everyone should say the same thing. And eventually, this also Reformation affected hymns and everything, where there was a standardization effort. The easy way for them to do it was like, okay, we lost the sounds. We don't have access to a lot of linguistic science to access it. Let's come up with something that works. And they're like, okay, Coptic is based on the Greek alphabet. You know what would make sense? Just get the Greek alphabet and reuse it again. So that was in the 1800s. They got the modern Greek alphabet and they just slapped Coptic on it, which works for the most part, but introduced some problems. This is the Greco Bohairic, is the one that is approved by the Coptic Church now. So if you're praying at any Coptic church, that's the one you would be praying with. That's the one that's more similar to Copts who know Coptic through hymns. It introduced some problems that require some mental gymnastics to make things work. You can see here the ghamma has like 3 sounds, and it's like, if it comes after an A sound, it's a gah sound. If it comes after, and otherwise, gha, you have something like the upsilon, or I was taught as epsilon. If it's preceded by an O, it's an U. If it's preceded by an A, by an A or an A, it's a V. Otherwise, it's an E. In any academic, it's like a wow sound, just like a wa or an U, just like a W or a U, or an Arabic wow. That's it. But this one introduced problem because once you put it, you're like, I don't know what to do with this. This doesn't make any sense. Once you apply the Greek pronunciation on it, so they had to just come up with different rules to make it work, and it works for the most part. It wouldn't make grammatical sense in some aspects, whereas like, what does the same letter sound changes if I just change the subject, and you're like, okay, so you just live with it. So if you're serious about grammar, you might need to do some tweaking. We'll get to it. If you just want to do it for the sake of hymns, this one is perfectly fine. So those are the 3 main pronunciations. We have the academic, linguistic science. Look at it. I don't care what has been inherited. We look at the manuscripts and we can deduce what sound they make. And we also look at the ancient Egyptian, see how the same letter has progressed. We have the old Bohairic that has been handed down to us, but it's been super Arabized. It's basically speak Arabic, which is why people sometimes call it Saidi, erroneously, just because it sounds like actually Saidi Egyptian. Like, it just sounds like Arabic. And then finally, the Greco Bohairic, which is based on the Reformation 200 years ago. Sounds like Greek. It's based on the modern, by modern I mean the 1800 Greek letters. You just put them as is and then slap the Coptic on it. And so on, that's used in the Coptic church. So it comes to the $1 million question, which one should I pick? We have a bunch of options. So you have all 3, and then there's a couple of variations that I just added myself, and with some examples. So there's it's like Greco. There's actually an Arabized Greco. It's where people just try to pronounce the modern way, or the Greco way in Arabic. So, which maintaining Arabic qualities in the sounds. So a word like afchi sarks, which means he incarnated. It's afchi sarks. Again, repeat, in Arabic, does not allow 2 consecutive vowels, a 2 consecutive consonant without a vowel in between in the same syllable. So you can't say afchi. You can't. You have to put a vowel in between, so you end up with afechi. You can't say sarks. You have to say sarks. So that's what you would hear in older recording. Again, people got Greco, like, fine, we'll use this, but then we're still Arabs. When they were still Arabs, they just spoke with an Arabic thing. That's where you see jinkim on everything. Everything has jinkim, just to make sounds easy, which is completely wrong. So you hear something like afechi sarks, peep nevma become be ibnevma, or pekethronos, if not bekethronos, and it's a web. The e is just an e, because that's how you say it in Arabic. So that's the first one. This one is your good harmony with the church. Most people will be fine with it. It's easy, but it's also wrong. Like, you're not with anyone. You're not with any team. The second one is the official Greco. You actually stick to the Greek way of pronouncing Coptic. You're still in harmony with the rest of the church. Looks cool. People think you're cool because you're well educated and you know your Coptic very well. So you say things like afchi sarks. You say peep nevma, pek thronos. So actually you can actually say pek thro. It works. Or peep nevma. You don't have to say peep nevma. Just peep nevma is more than enough. And also you maintain, for the Janja sound, you maintain the gah and the jah rules. So you say if go emos. But your alpha would probably be correct, and you go with like ithawab, because it's an alpha, not an alpha. So you say nainan ithawab. Then my little variation where you can do academic Greco, where sure you can grow with the Greco way, but you maintain the academic way of doing the U sound and the J sound just because it makes grammatical sense. So you still do just like Greco, just the official Greco. You say afchi sarks, you say, but you don't go for peep nevma, you say peep pneuma, because we know that the upsilon is a wah sound. So you say peep pneuma. And it does matter because if you're praying the midnight praises and you say, he gave his land as a heritage gives land as a heritage to his people, and then the next part goes in Greco you say ev kleronomeia, or in proper official Greek you say ev kleronomeia, because Greek doesn't take gingiv, so you say ev kleronomeia, so that's a V. But if you look at the grammar, it's actually a, which is a subject marker that you put before you start an object marker. So before you put an object, it's u because it's an indefinite article u, like anything that's an indefinite article, and then kleronomia or kleronomia, which is inheritance. So it will make more sense that you say ewe kleronomia, so you put an E, so an A sound and a W, so ewe kleronomia. These two sounds do not make a lot of difference. You're still in harmony-ish when you're still in harmony when you sing in most of the church. You will have to say things like ithwab, just because it's a full syllable. If you say ithwab, you'll get it, like you just be off. And then the jah as well. An example of he sent is pij. It would be like pig off, and then Jesus said would be pije isos. It's the same word. It's the same sound. It should be just a jah, pij off and pije. So it's also So you would say if jo emos. You would not be a little bit different. It is also subtle enough that you still go with the harmony of the church. You say if jo emos. But just for the sake of harmony, you do like ith uwab, just like the official Greco, just so you're not different, because you can't just skip a whole syllable. Or the second option is like a full-on academic way. That's if you care about ancient Egyptian more than you care about how the liturgic sound. You don't care about harmony. You just stick to how the academic way of doing things. So you say afchi sarks, you say peep pneuma, fju emos, and then you would say things like ithwab, which is the more grammatical proper way, which is actually, if it wasn't this case, the ithwab would have been ithwab with a T, not a theta. But because it's a W, it has to become a theta. It just makes way more sense to become a theta. So you have to, and a W, so you say ithwab. If you say that at church, you just sound odd because you missed the whole syllable. Because it's uwab, it's two syllable. If you do it in official Greco. So that's if you want. That's what I do at home on my own when I'm doing Coptic on my own outside the church. Finally, if you're nostalgic to how Copts used to speak Coptic up to 100, 200 years ago, and you're very okay with the Arabization of Coptic and the influence of Arabic, which is personally not a big fan of. I just don't want my Coptic to be Arabized. I would want to put a milestone of when Coptic start not becoming the main language, and it's like, okay, that's the Coptic I want to. So a natural evolution. That's like saying Old Bohairic is not like saying Shakespearean English and modern English. This is like saying the Germanic of the Anglo-Saxons, and then when the Normans came and introduced the Romance language or the French language, and we have the English that we have right now, and you're saying it's like, let's learn the German that the Anglo-Saxons used to speak, and we're going to use an English speaker. Might not be your most accurate representation, but some people like it. They would say, I believe, Afichi Sarix, not quite sure, but it would have things like Bi Pneuma, and you still have Evjo Emos and Itweb for Ithwab or Itwab. I think that's it. That should give a half-hour summary of all the pronunciation and all the different ways you can pronounce Coptic. Rule of thumb: if you do want to do the churchy way and you just care about hymns, just do the official Greco way. If you want to learn Coptic outside the church, then do the academic. If you like Arabic, just do Old Bohairic, and then everything in between, depending on what you want to accomplish. That's it. And Pio fa Pinuti Pliamin.